Instead of following orders to go back to jail, they head for the door.
Where is he going to go? How's he going to get out?
Not all criminals are smart.
There's nothing more intense than prisoner escapes caught on camera.
Viral escape videos are so enticing because it's like a real-life cops and robbers chase. We want to see if the guy's going to get away.
In Wisconsin,
Can I take this off or not? Just give me a minute.
a handcuffed teen suspect is left by himself.
You never leave someone in a room unless there's bars on the windows.
The 17-year-old doesn't miss this lucky opportunity. Within 10 seconds, he dips out the second-story window, falling 15 feet.
This kid jumps out the window head first with his hands cuffed. And miraculously, he seems to have made a safe landing because he gets up and he runs off.
You can see the clock on the wall where 10 minutes actually pass before the detective even comes back into the room.
Oh, no. Wait.
It takes deputies 4 hours to catch up with the runaway teen, who is still handcuffed. To prevent this from happening again, the sheriff's office has installed metal grates on the window. But the bold getaway will live in viral infamy. In Ohio, this man is booked on a felony drug charge, but he doesn't stick around for his sentencing. As deputies frantically chase after him, one hurls himself over a railing.
I admire the dedication, but I don't know what he was attempting to accomplish there, but A for effort.
The deputy is hospitalized for a minor concussion and broken ribs. The runaway suspect isn't caught until 3 days later. In Utah, there's a similar swan dive, but this time, it's the escapee who takes the fall.
This man clearly would rather go to the hospital or the graveyard than to jail.
The man is appearing in court on alleged drug charges, but he quickly ditches the courtroom and takes a desperate leap of faith.
What do people do when they fall? They brace themselves with their hands and their arms, but if you're handcuffed, you absolutely cannot do that. So what is going to brace the fall? Your head, your neck, and your back. Those are extreme injuries. I have to imagine that as soon as he was falling, he was regretting his decision.
He breaks his leg and pelvis and fractures his skull. The flying leap goes viral with 2 million views. In Washington, 2 other inmates try to make a break from the courtroom, but this judge isn't having it.
This video really shows the judge's commitment to justice.
Like a superhero, he tears off his robe and gives chase.
It's not the judge's job to do that, but he says, nope, it's my courtroom and I'm going to get him back.
After one man face plants, losing a shoe, they take off down the stairwell, with the judge chasing them. He recaps the adventure on the news.
Once I got into the stairwell, I knew I was going to be able to catch the one that was in front of me because it was the right thing to do.
This judge was definitely in great shape. He was ahead of the officers.
Both men are caught, one by the judge, the other a few blocks away by someone else.
But I hope the takeaway from these videos, specifically for the law enforcement agency, is they need to increase their security measures. Just a hunch.
And it's a lack in security that leads to a jailbreak that has the entire country talking.
For a 2-week manhunt.
For an extremely dangerous man. He is now armed with a .22 caliber rifle.
This convict climbing the walls.
He had nothing to lose.
August 31st, 2023, Westchester, Pennsylvania. At the county prison, an inmate in the exercise yard is about to take fitness to another level.
He probably did a couple test runs where he went up a couple feet just to see if he could do it.
Cameras capture his daring escape.
I've never seen someone use their body and 2 walls as leverage to go backwards.
The prisoner's name is Danilo Cavalcante, and he's considered to be highly dangerous.
This guy who escaped was in there for murder. If he can escape, I'm sure he was willing to risk it all.
Cavalcante is in prison on a first-degree murder conviction for fatally stabbing his ex-girlfriend 38 times in front of her kids. Just 9 days before this dramatic escape, he is sentenced to life without parole. He is also wanted for another murder in his home country of Brazil.
We know that this person has a disregard for human life, so what are they willing to do to anyone in that surrounding community who attempts to stop them?
And there's another concern.
The staff didn't even notice he was missing for an hour.
He climbs the wall just before 9 a.m., but officials don't sound the alarm until 10:01.
This prisoner had a head start before anyone even knew what was going on.
Nobody knows, nobody's aware. That is terrifying.
The community panics. Schools cancel classes. Residents advised to stay alert.
Authorities urging everyone to lock up their homes and vehicles.
There's a murderer running around in the community.
Police in Pennsylvania are searching for a dangerous murderer who managed to crawl his way out of prison.
3 days in, still no sign of the 34-year-old fugitive.
We have helicopters over top. We have police officers everywhere.
The manhunt tops the news.
Very urgent search for an extremely dangerous man.
When you think about the square footage that has to be covered, especially a wooded area, it is a needle in a haystack.
But then investigators get a break. A security camera catches Cavalcante at a botanical garden just 5 miles from the prison.
He was out there in the wilderness, living in the woods on nothing.
He's seen again 2 more times the following night. On day 9, 2 porch cameras spot him, clean-shaven and wearing a green hoodie.
He was somewhat of a survivalist, going from house to house, stealing whatever supplies he needed to stay on the run.
On day 11, a resident who catches him stealing a rifle fires several shots at him as he flees. Police warn the public not to underestimate how dangerous this man is.
He's killed 2 people previously. I would suspect that he's desperate enough to use that weapon.
Authorities increased the reward for his capture to $25,000. As the story goes viral, people are terrified.
Obviously, this man is very dangerous. Police are really preparing for any eventuality.
He is very determined. We are even more determined.
And then, as the nation panics about the murderer who is on the loose.
We have breaking news right now. Authorities have confirmed the capture of Danilo Cavalcante, the escaped killer in Pennsylvania.
It turns out a canine named Yoda found Cavalcante hiding in a pile of logs. He's charged with 20 offenses, including burglary, criminal trespassing, theft, and possession of a firearm, and transferred to a maximum security prison to serve his life sentence. Still, the fact that he was able to spider crawl his way out of prison in the first place leaves the community on edge.
You would just think that if someone is in prison for murder, they are keeping track of them at all times.
But as you'll see in this next viral video, sometimes it takes an unexpected hero to thwart danger.
The customer who stepped in when things went south.
A good Samaritan stepping in.
I saw evil happen in front of me.
Look, calm down. I do not want to hurt you, man.
June 16th, 2023, Chicago, Illinois. On his way home with 2 of his 6 kids, Idris Redzovic makes a quick stop at a convenience store.
To treat my kids to some Slurpees after their jiu-jitsu class. As I was getting the drinks, these girls came in complaining about a guy causing problems in the parking lot.
Idris steps outside the store, ordering his kids to stay in the car. The man appears to be dangerous, so he dials police. That's when you see him, in the black tank top, walking into the store.
I see him like arguing with a store clerk.
And things turn violent.
He threw an overhand heavy punch and hit the store clerk in the head. Once I saw that, I just jumped.
The 19-year-old clerk in the red jacket gets caught in the middle as Idris takes the man down.
I just grabbed him and held him down, and I tied him up and I put him into a pretzel.
Idris seems very comfortable keeping this man in a very uncomfortable position.
That's because this dad is an expert in martial arts.
I'm a head instructor at my own academy in Chicago. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I was able to twist them up in a position called the gift wrap hold. It's a good way to control somebody without having to put any damage on them.
Watching it all from the car, Idris's kids pull out their phones to record.
Look at this. I was beating up that guy in the store because he's trying to beat up another person. Wait, that's the bad boy.
Other witnesses also start recording.
These people keep on recording him.
So Idris joins in and begins streaming live to Facebook.
I'm putting you on camera, so if anything happens... Hey, homie, let me... You come in, homie.
I wasn't sure if the cops were gonna come in and grab me and say, I'm the bad guy, and I had to protect myself.
Come on. No, man, I'm not letting you go, man. You were harassing those girls. Going nowhere, brother.
Then, things take a surprising turn.
What's your name? My name's... Don't worry about my name.
Where you from, bro?
I'm from Bosnia.
All right, then when you checked your medical, where'd you go?
I came here in Chicago.
Where?
In Chicago.
Where? What neighborhood?
From this neighborhood.
They're having this full-on conversation on camera.
Why isn't my life like yours?
Cause, bro, you got it easy.
How do I got it easy?
The conversation gets really deep, similar to what you would see between a therapist and a patient.
My dad passed away when I was a little kid. I had it rough, too. You understand me? I didn't have a father.
All right, so let me go then.
You have a father?
Let me go. No.
Me neither. And I didn't make no excuses.
It's almost as if this attacker is trying to negotiate with Idris, similar to what you see in like a hostage negotiation.
I got sons, little.
I got kids too.
For a split second, I even thought about letting him go.
What? I'm trying to be nice to you, man.
You could let me go.
I'm not letting you go.
That turns out to be a wise move. Because when chatting fails, the man gets aggressive.
Don't do that shit to me, bro.
I don't want to
hurt you. Oh, little bitch. Don't do me like that. I got my own kids.
We all got problems.
He's literally fighting him on the ground right now. Big Mel. Look, he's beating him up.
Idris suspects the man is under the influence.
You're too drunk right now. Then why are you so damn wasted? You reek of
I'm
alcohol.
not wasting my...
And he has to hold him down for 20 minutes until police show up.
I'm gonna make this real easy for you guys. Break me arm. Give me your arm.
You gonna break my arm. Damn. Hold on.
He swung at this guy, started attacking this guy, and that's when I jumped in and took him down to the ground.
Can I tell my girlfriend?
30-year-old Christopher Cruz is arrested and charged with misdemeanor battery and retail theft. And Idris learns that his live stream has blown up.
I kind of forgot about it. I find out later it had millions of views.
His heroics quickly hit the news.
The tables are turned on a suspected thief.
You can let me go.
I'm not letting you go.
Idris says he's just glad he was able to intervene before things got any worse.
I'm gonna jump in and help, you know, any chance I get, if I think it's the right thing to do.
You got a little bitch.
Coming up next, shocking video of a man whose date night ends with him not going home.
What are you gonna do? Throw me in jail? We're going to jail.
You ever followed my eyes? Yes, sir. Following.
He's out meeting someone from Instagram.
Things start to take a bad turn.
She's a elementary teacher, bro. I mean, jail.
January 3rd, 2022, Englewood, Florida. It's 9:30 on a Monday evening.
Let me know the unit, please.
A sheriff's deputy pulls this car over for speeding.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Turn the car off.
Yeah, absolutely.
When an officer engages with an operator, they're looking for potential indicators of why they're not abiding by traffic laws.
Do you know the speed limit coming off Englewood Beach?
35.
It's 35. Give me your license, your registration, your proof of insurance.
Okay. So I just moved here 4 months ago.
4 months ago? Where from?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin?
I know, bold, right?
Cool, man.
The operator's being cooperative, very talkative, which is, by the way, another potential indicator.
So I didn't get my license registered yet.
I will take whatever you have.
So here's that.
Okay.
And,
That's a credit card. I don't need that. You have the registration?
I just moved here and I didn't have the registration yet.
Okay.
Because I just moved here a month and a half before I bought the car.
Okay.
So I didn't get my plates yet.
He's just kind of talking in circles.
I bought this entire car 2 months before I moved here.
Got it. Step out of the vehicle for me, okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We don't have smell-o-vision, but if I had to guess, this officer knew pretty quickly that this was probably a DUI situation.
All right, we're coming right back here, okay? Come on, right back here. How much have you had to drink tonight?
6 drinks.
6 drinks?
6 drinks.
Okay. Over how long?
8 p.m.
8 o'clock? Okay.
It's been a while.
It's been a while? Okay.
I met a girl on Instagram, you know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
He's out drinking, having a good time, meeting someone from Instagram for a date.
The officer may be laughing.
Relax, just relax. We're just talking right now, okay?
But he is not about to let this driver go without making sure he's safe to be behind the wheel.
And the way that we do that is through standardized field sobriety tests.
Yes, sir.
And that shows
I've done 2.
You've done 2?
I've done 2.
Can you see the red tip of my finger right here?
Yes, sir, I can.
You're gonna follow with your eyes and your eyes only, okay?
Yes, sir.
It's not only the test itself, it's the individual's ability to follow directions.
Follow with your
right,
eyes.
Following. Right.
Okay.
Down.
You're looking straight at me without
I did
following.
not. I followed the...
You did not.
Incorrect.
Not a good start to this test.
I'm listening, sir. Right.
We're not following with our eyes anymore, sir. We're gonna move on, okay?
1, 2, 3.
Are you done?
He bombs one test after the other.
11,001, 11,014, eh?
He's so drunk, he thinks he's doing a good job at this point. He doesn't realize that all he's really doing is digging himself a deeper hole.
And left.
Left, right here, on my nose.
Okay, we got one more to do, okay? For this
Yes,
one,
sir.
we're gonna stand just like that. We're bringing our hands behind your back.
Where do you want me to face?
There you go.
That
Put your
way?
hands together.
Yes, sir.
You're being placed under arrest for DUI.
It was actually a pretty good move. Hey, we have one more test. I need you to put your hands behind your back. Unfortunately, once he realizes that he's being put in handcuffs, the whole situation takes a turn.
What do you have in your car that needs to go through the jail?
You have a phone and a wallet?
Can I help you guys through my car?
No, we're gonna go through it for you. Do you have anything in there that we
What
didn't
do
know
you mean?
about?
Why are you gonna go through my car?
It does bring up some additional questions. Are there drugs? Are there weapons? Is there a potential victim in there that we're unaware of at this point?
Hey.
He becomes very combative, very argumentative, non-compliant.
Hey!
Please.
Please.
Do not do that again or I'm gonna hobble you. Do you understand me?
What do you mean hobble me?
Do not punch your head against the
What are you
cage.
gonna do? Throw me in jail?
We're going to jail.
Holy I mean, damn jail!
Dude! This is crazy, bro!
Stop what you're doing.
When you're kicking on the doors, fighting with police officers, that will lead to a resisting arrest charge.
Officers find nothing unusual in the driver's car.
Hey! Hey! Sir!
I got your wallet and your phone.
And as reality sets in, he forgets all about the Instagram date he bragged about and remembers his girlfriend.
My damn girlfriend, who's an elementary teacher, needs a ride home.
We'll arrange that.
No, you won't.
I think the girlfriend doesn't really care as much about getting picked up.
She needs to be picked up.
More so, who were you on an Instagram date with?
She's a elementary teacher, bro.
That's something that he may have to answer for more than even this video.
Police arrest 24-year-old Daniel Jolly, and he is later found guilty of driving under the influence.
This operator blew a BAC of .248, so he was well over the legal limit of .08.
Video of his drunk tantrum races across the internet with more than 2 million views.
I know that at the beginning, this is kind of a lighthearted situation where the operator's funny, having a good time. DUI is not a funny situation. You're putting yourself at risk and also the people driving around you.
Holy I mean, damn jail!
Complete chaos, caught on camera.
What is happening here?
This video is going viral.
11 million people worldwide.
March 6th, 2021, Scottsdale, Arizona. Customers line up at a popular bath and lotion store during the time of social distancing.
Some people had masks, some people didn't. I think tensions were a bit higher then.
Still, this is a shopping mall, not a place where you expect adults to cause mayhem.
When you're in like a lotion and soap store, it's very zen. You're taking in aromatherapy scents. You would think that most people are pretty chill.
But that's not the case at this store.
People in line were upset by another person who they perceived as cutting in line.
As things get heated, people start recording, and employees step in to help.
That's when it got a little bit violent.
Quickly, the line dispute devolves into chaos.
It is the customers against the employees. It's not what you expect to see. This isn't the WWE. This isn't like a gym class or something like that.
Multiple brawls break out.
I would say it was on par with UFC. You know, we got some grappling.
There's hair pulling, there's glasses breaking. It's such an extreme and so violent.
Women rolling around on the floor next to candles and soaps and lotions.
Employees and other shoppers finally managed to separate the women, putting an end to the vicious fighting.
Hey, you beat her ass. You got her.
When police arrive, they attempt to get to the bottom of the massive fight, and the interviews are all caught on body cam.
My daughter had COVID, and she got in my face over my baby stroller. Who did? The black and white dress? Yes.
This is what happened with somebody saying we cut in line. It's so bizarre.
The workers just punched me. I hit back and then I got pushed out of the store. Based on witness accounts of people that don't know either one of you, you were the aggressor.
We are victims here, sir. You're treating us like criminals. Honestly, you are. No, he is.
But we just want to go home.
But I get that, but he's treating us like criminals.
Oh!
And it isn't long before the video is all over the news.
This video is going viral.
11 million people worldwide have now seen that chaotic confrontation.
Some people question why people were filming instead of calling for help.
Something we see so much is that people just gather around and start filming it as a spectacle versus an actual crime or disturbance going on. In a perfect world, all these people would be like, I'm gonna film this in case, you know, the cops or a judge needs it.
Online comments are split over whether the customers or the employees are to blame.
Some people were commenting that you should never touch a customer.
I would say that the customer is definitely not always right.
In the end, it's the customers who get in trouble. Mother and daughter-in-law Brianna Johnson and Jolynn O'Daniel are banned from the mall and issued citations for assault and disorderly conduct. The assault charge is dropped in return for the payment of a small fine.
I did not do anything wrong. I got attacked by 3 people and they're telling me I'm bad. That's bull.
And it's a lesson to pack your patience when you go shopping.
Look, I think that every retail employee has probably wanted to punch a customer every now and again, but you don't get to do it, and you shouldn't.
You shouldn't be able to terrorize innocent children either. Which is why this next chilling video is every parent's worst nightmare.
There's a live shooter. There's a live shooter.
Absolute panic sets in.
Run.
In a moment's notice, it goes to running for your life.
I don't know. They were on that field over there.
July 10th, 2022, Wilson, North Carolina. It's early morning as a youth baseball tournament gets underway.
This video starts with what seems like an idyllic morning in America.
Don't watch the ball.
You have little kids playing Little League, and there's nothing more All-American than baseball.
Caitlin Kozepke is in the stands watching her 7-year-old son, Jaden.
Hey, let's go, boys!
These boys were playing their hearts out.
As she often does, Caitlin is live streaming the game.
Boys, listen, this is the camera filming the game, so don't get in front of it, okay?
As the game heads into the 5th inning, Jaden's team is getting ready to hit.
I was feeling good. I was first to bat.
And then, out of nowhere,
Initially, people seem a little confused.
but terror quickly sets in.
It becomes clear that this is gunfire.
I mean, absolute panic.
There's a live shooting here. There's a live shooter. There's a live shooter. There's a live shooter.
In a moment's notice, it goes from just watching a baseball team play to running for your life. You see family and friends diving under the bleachers because they have absolutely no idea where it's coming from.
On the field, 7-year-old Jaden is frantic. He can't find his mom in the panic.
I was terrified. I was looking where Mom was sitting, and she wasn't there. I was just scared.
This place was full of little children, and it was full of parents who were far from their kids and couldn't get to them and couldn't protect them.
I don't know.
What you see is sheer terror.
It was screaming, chaos, tripping over stuff.
Nobody knows who is firing or why.
The first thing on everyone's mind is this a mass casualty situation where this person's about to open fire on everybody that's at that field?
And there are young players out in the open, cowering in fear.
If they stand up and run, they're perfect targets.
I don't know.
Shots have been fired at a Little League tournament in North Carolina, causing absolute terror.
There's a live shooter.
Caitlin Kozepke is frantically searching for her 7-year-old son, Jaden. Caitlin's brother, a sheriff's deputy, has told her that in a shooting, there is only one thing to do: get on the ground and take cover. She finally sees that Jaden is safely huddled in the dugout with his coach, so she bolts for a nearby cornfield.
Run!
I saw her just starting sprinting to the cornfield.
Incredibly, she's still live streaming and praying someone can help.
Mom, are you watching my live? There's a live shooter! I don't know if anybody's been shot. We're just trying to run with the boys. Where the hell are they at? I don't know. They were on that field over there.
A few minutes later, Jaden's coach runs the boys toward the cornfield too.
Get them in the pasture and lay down. Jaden, stay with your coach and lay down.
Our coach was just like, don't look back, just keep running. I was like, don't start busting out in tears because they might hear it.
For 15 tense minutes, everyone crouches in the field behind a line of trees. Jaden and his mom are within shouting distance of each other, but still not together.
Okay.
Police race to the scene, but everyone has to stay huddled on the ground until the area is secure. It's a petrifying wait.
I was scared that the people with the gun were gonna find us.
After what feels like an eternal 20 minutes, Caitlin and Jaden are finally reunited.
Once we got in the car and we were on the road headed out of town, I could take a breath.
The frightening video goes viral and makes national news.
Gunshots ringing out at a Little League game in North Carolina.
Police say at this point they do not believe that this baseball field was targeted. But for those who were actually out there on the field when the bullets started flying, they certainly felt like they were under attack.
Thankfully, no one is injured. Police still don't know who the shooter is or where they went. What makes it even more terrifying is that a bullet hit the field, not far from where an outfielder was standing.
We're talking about this high-velocity rifle that was firing shots while there was a Little League championship game taking place, and whoever was responsible for that is still out there.
Caitlin remains haunted by all of it.
I have very severe PTSD. When you have no control over protecting your own children, it's terrifying. I struggle every day.
Still, the parents are determined that the frightening ordeal won't change life for their Little Leaguers.
We made sure that this event did not ruin any of these boys. We wanted to get them on a baseball field as soon as possible. They played games, they wore their uniforms, and they had a big time.
In this viral video, an irate woman has a big time hurling things.
They did lose their mind.
She does not care at all. She tosses it over the counter.
August 6th, 2023, Indianapolis, Indiana. It's the breakfast rush at this fast food eatery.
Everyone seems pretty chill, but everything turns within seconds.
A woman who got her food from the drive-thru walks inside and angrily tosses her order onto the counter.
The woman is arguing with the worker.
If you've ever been at a fast food restaurant, chances are someone is yelling at the people who are being underpaid and working so much, and you just want them to have a win.
But this argument quickly spirals out of control. And when the fed-up employee reaches over to slap the customer, it's on.
And you'll never believe what happens next.
Out of camera view, the furious woman tries to get behind the counter to confront the employee. That's when a stranger steps in to help.
At first you're thinking, is this guy just a civilian? But then he flashes a badge, so you're wondering, like, is he off-duty security? Is he retired law enforcement?
Whoever he is, suddenly the woman is back. When she starts hurling things at employees, he attempts to body block her.
She does not care at all.
She seems determined to destroy the restaurant.
She, at one point, actually grabs a giant metal promotional sign and tosses it over the counter.
After 5 minutes, she leaves, only to come back for one last defiant toss.
This is a new level of rage.
Police still don't know who the woman is or what set her off, so no charges are filed. The identity of the Good Samaritan who tried to defuse it all also remains a mystery.
I would give him an A+. I know that if I was in that situation, I probably would be a little scared for my safety, especially how erratic she was acting, but he was very calm.
Video of the sign-hurling rage becomes a viral sensation, with many saying they can relate to both sides.
I have definitely gone off on a fast food worker before. It was probably when I was much younger, but I also know that it's not a great idea to yell at people who are handling your food.
I have never, but I have been with someone who did not get the proper sweet and tangy sauce that they ordered, and they did lose their mind in a way that I was like, I've known this person for years. I've never seen you act like this. So the relationship between person and their fast food order is not one to be messed with.
And coming up, incredible video that shows how far a cop will go to catch a bad guy.
How to get a taxi, don't mind me.
dramatic body cam video.
Had to get a taxi, don't mind me. Did you really get into somebody else's car?
This is above and beyond.
Go pick a right.
June 18th, 2022, White Settlement, Texas.
This is a hot day in the middle of June where a foot chase is happening right in the heart of Texas.
It begins when officers try to pull over a car reported as stolen. And the suspect takes off.
You have no idea why this person is running. What did they do, or what are they in possession of?
It's 98 degrees, and the oppressive heat puts an immediate strain on the officers.
We're wearing boots and polyester uniforms. Now add into that a 20-pound belt and a bulletproof vest that's restricting your breathing. It may look cool on camera, but it is not fun, I promise you. Eventually, the suspect gains some distance.
A corporal who is on foot trying to catch up to his partner. He fell a little bit behind.
But then, Corporal Porter gets an unexpected assist.
What's up? Yeah. Go pick a right.
The driver is a worried neighbor who saw the officers struggling in the heat.
Look, this is a car with air conditioning. It's hot. They have been running a long way. He accepts this ride on the good faith that this person is going to do a good deed.
I appreciate it.
It's okay. I was going to try to see if I can block you with a car.
But while this officer is getting into the vehicle, another officer is still in an active foot pursuit with the assailant. And I've had that happen to me where you lose a colleague during a chase, and now you're alone. It's just you and the suspect.
I mean, he could have been overpowered. Something could have went wrong.
Making it even more risky, Officer Samuel Brown is a rookie, and this is his first foot chase.
He's fast. He's on his feet. This is the job that he's always wanted to do.
About a minute later, the Good Samaritan and his passenger finally catch up.
Right. Right.
Only to find he already has the man on the ground.
Had to get a taxi, don't mind me. We got him.
By the time he gets to the scene, his partner is making this arrest.
And incredibly, he's doing it with one hand.
The twist in this story, that officer making that arrest only has one arm.
Yeah, I was born with one arm.
I think it's safe to say that he single-handedly arrested this person without the officer's help. Kudos to him.
I was so tired at that point. I'm like, did you really get into somebody else's car?
The one-armed arrest, aided by the unusual taxi ride, makes big news.
Police in White Settlement are thanking a Good Samaritan who was in the right place at the right time.
Some of us have better cardio than others. And then I see Porter jump out of the car, and it's pretty funny. Well, I think he said something like taxi services here or something like that. Had to get a taxi, don't mind me.
The suspect, 31-year-old Joshua Taylor Brown, is charged with evading arrest and unauthorized use of a vehicle. He's sentenced to 6 months. As the story goes viral, people applaud the rookie cop.
This officer had only been on the job for 6 months, and this was his first foot pursuit. So 1 for 1 so far, nothing like the on-the-job training.
As for the identity of the Good Samaritan driver, he drove off before they could get his name. So police post a photo of his car on social media with a special thank you. And in viral fashion, the civilian assistant is revealed as this man, Jimmy Davis, a former security guard who's always dreamed of being a police officer. At a press conference, he says he was happy to help.
I said, sir, so would you want to ride? He goes, yeah, man, let me get in. I did what I had to do. I would do it again, too, though.
I appreciate it.
At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is helping out those in need.
Had to get a taxi, don't mind me.
The phone rang just before dawn, slicing through the quiet like a blade, and in that moment the city of Aurora, Illinois, did not yet know it was about to remember a night it had spent 20 years trying to forget. The voice on the other end was low, controlled, almost rehearsed, and it said only one thing before the line went dead. I need to tell you what really happened in 1999. Outside, winter clung to the streets, frost on the windshields, breath hanging in the air, and somewhere beneath that calm, a cold case that had hardened over decades began to crack. This was the kind of call detectives dream about and dread at the same time, because confessions don't arrive clean, and the truth, when it finally comes, rarely looks like justice. In the summer of 1999, Aurora was a city balance between past and future, factory smokestacks fading into tech corridors, neighborhoods where everyone still knew each other by name. On a humid Friday night in July, the kind where the air sticks to your skin, 23-year-old Emily Carter left her apartment on Galena Boulevard just after 9 p.m. She told her roommate she was meeting someone, didn't say who, didn't say where, just grabbed her keys and smiled the way people do when they think they'll be back soon. She never was. By morning, her bed was untouched, her phone went straight to voicemail, and her car sat exactly where she'd parked it, doors locked, purse still inside. By noon, the word missing was already spreading through the city like a bruise. Police treated it as a disappearance at first, not a crime, because Emily was an adult, because there were no signs of a struggle, because the city had rules about when to panic. Officers knocked on doors, asked neighbors if they'd seen her, checked bars, bus stations, friends' houses. Nothing. Her last confirmed sighting was a grainy ATM camera a few blocks from her apartment, timestamped 9:17 p.m., Emily withdrawing $40, glancing over her shoulder as if someone was watching. The footage would later be slowed down, enhanced, played on local news again and again, her face frozen in a moment that, in hindsight, looked like hesitation or fear or nothing at all. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Flyers went up on telephone poles, grocery store windows, laundromats. Emily's face stared back from black and white photocopies, smiling, alive, a cruel contrast to the silence that followed her name. Volunteers organized search parties along the Fox River, through wooded patches behind industrial parks, into abandoned lots where trash and rumors collected. Dogs were brought in, their handlers tense, hoping for a signal, dreading it at the same time. They found nothing. No clothing. No blood. No answers. Just a city growing uneasy with each sunset. When detectives dug deeper, they found a life that didn't fit neatly into a missing persons checklist. Emily was responsible, worked as a medical assistant, paid her bills on time. She had no history of running away, no known enemies, no obvious reason to vanish. Friends described her as cautious, careful, the kind of person who texted when she got home safe. Yet her phone record showed a flurry of calls and messages in the days leading up to her disappearance, many from a number registered to a prepaid phone. The content was gone, lost to the limitations of the era, but the frequency was there, a digital heartbeat speeding up before going flat. The investigation shifted, quietly at first, then openly, into darker territory. Detectives began to use the word abduction. They asked about ex-boyfriends, coworkers, casual acquaintances. They interviewed the man Emily had dated briefly earlier that year, a relationship that had ended without drama, according to both sides. They looked at her workplace, her routines, her favorite coffee shop. Tips poured in, some earnest, some unhinged, each one logged, each one another thread that led nowhere. Local news stations ran segments at night, anchors speaking in solemn tones, warning viewers to be vigilant, reminding them that this could happen to anyone. Then, 6 weeks after Emily disappeared, a hiker found something tangled in brush near an access road outside town. It was a single shoe, worn, scuffed, unmistakably hers. The discovery hit Aurora like a punch to the chest. Search teams flooded the area again, combing every inch of ground, their boots pressing down hope with every step. More items followed, scattered, as if placed deliberately or discarded in haste. A jacket, a necklace, a broken phone case. There was still no body, but the language changed. Missing became presumed dead. The case hardened, cooling as leads dried up, as witnesses moved, memories blurred, and the city learned how to live with an open wound. Years went by. Detectives rotated off the case, retired, passed their notes to younger officers who stared at the files like artifacts from another era. DNA technology advanced, databases expanded, cold case units were formed with promises of resurrection, but Emily Carter's name remained ink on paper, evidence locked in boxes, questions sealed with dust. Her parents aged visibly in old interview footage, hope eroding into something quieter, heavier. Each anniversary brought a brief flare of attention, a candlelight vigil, a quote about not giving up, followed by the familiar silence. And then, decades later, that call came in. A confession, offered without theatrics, without lawyers at first, a man walking into a station he'd avoided his entire life. He was older now, grayer, carrying the weight of years that hadn't softened him so much as bent him inward. He said he couldn't sleep anymore. He said he saw her face when he closed his eyes. He said he wanted it to stop. Detectives listened, careful not to react, because they had heard false confessions before, desperate people inserting themselves into tragedies for reasons that never made sense. But as he spoke, details surfaced that had never been public, details buried in reports, details that made the room feel smaller. He knew about the ATM. He knew about the shoe. He knew about the necklace that hadn't been mentioned on the news. He described the night with a clarity that suggested rehearsal, or memory sharpened by guilt, or both. He talked about roads not on maps, about sounds that carried in the dark, about decisions made in seconds that ruined entire lives. The words cold case, solved began to circulate in whispers among officers who had waited years to say them out loud. Outside the station, the city woke up to headlines that felt unreal, like history rewritten overnight. People who had been teenagers in 1999 were now parents, showing their children articles on their phones, explaining why a name from the past suddenly mattered again. Shock rippled through neighborhoods that thought they were done with this story. Old suspicions resurfaced. New ones formed. Everyone asked the same question in different ways. How had this stayed hidden for so long? But confessions are not endings. They are beginnings of another kind of nightmare. Because as investigators began to test his story against the evidence, cracks appeared, small at first, then impossible to ignore. Timelines didn't align. Locations shifted. Certain details were precise, others evasive. The man corrected himself too often, as if navigating a maze he'd built himself and forgotten the layout. Prosecutors urged caution. Detectives pressed harder. And in that pressure, the truth did what it always does in cold cases. It resisted. The city watched as hope and doubt collided in real time. News vans parked outside the courthouse. Commentators argued over semantics, over whether closure required certainty or just belief. Emily's family was thrust back into the spotlight, asked to respond, to feel, to perform grief they had never finished processing. They listened to the confession in private, their faces unreadable, because the past, when it returns, does not ask permission. Somewhere in the files, among yellowed notes and faded photographs, the case breathed again, not solved, not unsolved, suspended in a moment that felt eerily like 1999 all over. A shocking confession had stunned the city, yes, but it had also reopened every question, every doubt, every fear that time had buried but never erased. And as investigators prepared to dig deeper, to test every word against the cold, unyielding facts, Aurora held its breath, waiting to see whether this was the end of a long nightmare or just another turn in a story that refused to stay buried. The confession didn't bring relief. It brought noise. Inside the Aurora Police Department, the old case room filled again with movement, boxes dragged from storage, evidence tags fluttering like small flags of unfinished business. Detectives who had never worked the case before stood shoulder to shoulder with veterans who remembered the smell of summer rain the night Emily Carter vanished. The man who claimed responsibility sat in an interview room down the hall, hands folded, eyes fixed on a spot just above the table, as if looking directly at the truth might make it disappear. Outside, the city buzzed with a familiar unease, the kind that creeps back into your bones when you realize the past has teeth. They started where they always do, with the timeline, because time doesn't lie even when people do. The man said he met Emily shortly after she left her apartment, that she had agreed to talk, that it was supposed to be quick. He placed himself near the ATM on Galena Boulevard around the same time the camera caught her withdrawing cash, a coincidence too sharp to ignore. Detectives pulled traffic footage, old dispatch logs, weather reports, anything that could anchor his words to reality. He described the heat that night, the way the air felt heavy and electric, and he was right. He mentioned a passing freight train, the horn echoing through the streets, and records confirmed one had rolled through at 9:22 p.m. The room grew quiet as each verified detail tightened the knot. But then came the gaps. He claimed they drove west, toward the outskirts of town, but couldn't remember which route they took. He said she was calm, then said she was panicking, then corrected himself again, the story bending under its own weight. When pressed about the scattered personal items found weeks later, he hesitated just long enough for the silence to speak. He knew where the shoe had been discovered, but his explanation for how it got there shifted with every retelling. Detectives exchanged looks, the unspoken language of doubt and experience, because they had seen this pattern before, the mix of truth and invention that made cold cases so hard to thaw. They reopened every lead from 1999, not to revisit the past, but to stress test the present. Old witness statements were read aloud, their words echoing strangely fresh. A neighbor who had reported a scream but recanted. A gas station clerk who thought he recognized Emily hours later, miles away. A truck driver who swore he saw a woman matching her description near the interstate. Each account was mapped against the confession, looking for alignment, for collision, for something that clicked. Some points matched too well. Others refused to line up at all. The prepaid phone loomed large, a relic of a different technological age, but suddenly relevant again. Records showed dozens of calls between that number and Emily's phone in the days before she disappeared. The man admitted owning a prepaid phone back then, said it was common, said he'd lost it years ago. Detectives tracked purchase records, store by store, receipt by receipt, chasing a paper trail most people believed no longer existed. A clerk remembered selling a phone to a man who fit his description, remembered because he'd paid in cash and asked too many questions. Memory is unreliable, but sometimes it latches onto odd details, and this one did. As the investigation deepened, so did the city's reaction. Talk radio lit up with speculation. Social media dissected every leaked detail, every pause in the man's testimony. People began to remember things they hadn't thought about in years. A strange car idling on their street, a coworker who'd acted off that summer, a rumor they'd dismissed as gossip. Tips flooded in again, overwhelming the unit assigned to sift through them. Hope and suspicion traveled together, inseparable, feeding off each other. Emily's family remained mostly silent, their statements brief, controlled. They had lived through false alarms before, through psychics and hoaxes and well-meaning strangers who promised answers and delivered pain. This time felt different, heavier, because the man's words carried enough truth to be dangerous. In private, they asked detectives questions no one else heard, about evidence, about certainty, about whether believing him would finally let them rest. The answers were cautious, because certainty was still a luxury the case couldn't afford. Forensic teams re-examined every item tied to Emily, using tools that didn't exist in 1999. The jacket, the necklace, the fragments of plastic from the phone case were tested again, scraped, scanned, analyzed. DNA profiles were extracted, partial, degraded, but usable enough to compare against modern databases. The man provided a sample willingly, a gesture that could be read as confidence or resignation. Results came back slowly, each report another page in a story that refused to settle. Some traces matched him. Others didn't match anyone at all. That mismatch set off alarms. Detectives considered possibilities they hadn't dared to voice at first. An accomplice. A secondary suspect. Or the darker option, a confession designed to end a conscience, not to reveal the whole truth. The man was questioned again, this time with evidence laid out like a chessboard. He grew defensive, then emotional, then distant. He insisted he was telling the truth, then admitted he might be misremembering certain details. The language shifted, subtle but telling, from certainty to suggestion. As days turned into weeks, the narrative the city had embraced began to wobble. Headlines softened. Phrases like alleged and under investigation crept back into print. Commentators argued about the nature of guilt, about whether time erodes truth or sharpens it. The man's past was examined under a microscope. Old acquaintances came forward with stories that painted him as volatile, controlling, capable of violence. Others defended him, describing a quiet loner who kept to himself. The contrast only deepened the uncertainty. Detectives uncovered something else buried in the original files, a lead that had been sidelined decades earlier because it lacked evidence and didn't fit the prevailing theory at the time. A second vehicle, seen near Emily's apartment that night, described differently by two witnesses, but consistent enough to raise questions. The man denied owning such a car, denied being near that street at that hour, then later conceded he might have driven by. The inconsistency lingered, a stain that wouldn't wash out. The pressure mounted. Prosecutors demanded clarity before filing charges, knowing the risks of building a case on a confession alone. Investigators pushed back, arguing that waiting too long could let momentum die. In the middle of it all sat the truth, elusive, fragmented, refusing to be pinned down. The cold case was awake now, restless, shaking off decades of sleep, but it wasn't ready to surrender. At night, Aurora felt smaller, tighter, as if the streets themselves were listening. People locked their doors earlier, checked on their neighbors, revisited memories they'd convinced themselves were harmless. The story wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about time, about what gets lost and what survives. The confession had promised an ending, but instead it had reopened the wound, revealing layers beneath that were darker and more complex than anyone expected. And as detectives prepared for another round of interviews, another dive into the past, the question hanging over the city grew louder, sharper, impossible to ignore. If this man wasn't telling the whole truth, then where did the rest of it live? In a forgotten witness. In a piece of evidence no one had thought to test. Or in someone else entirely, still walking free, still silent, still waiting for time to do what it always does best, make people forget. Time didn't soften the questions, it sharpened them. As the confession stalled under scrutiny, detectives turned back to the summer of 1999 with renewed aggression, peeling away assumptions that had calcified into fact. They rebuilt the city as it was then, street by street, light by light, mapping Emily Carter's last known movements against a version of Aurora that no longer existed. Old zoning maps were spread across tables, highlighting alleys since paved over, lots now occupied by chain stores, shortcuts only locals remembered. The past, it turned out, still had hiding places. They revisited Emily's apartment first, not physically, but through photographs and reports. The scene had been too clean back then, too ordinary, and that ordinariness had delayed urgency. No forced entry. No overturned furniture. Just a half-empty glass in the sink and a receipt on the counter dated that same evening. Detectives noticed something new this time, a detail overlooked for years because it didn't scream danger. The receipt was from a convenience store 2 blocks away, time-stamped 8:46 p.m., barely 30 minutes before Emily left. She hadn't mentioned stopping anywhere to her roommate. It meant she'd already been out once that night, already moving through the city, already intersecting with someone else's timeline. Security footage from that store had long since been erased, but the clerk's statement remained. He described a man standing near the coolers, watching Emily without speaking. At the time, it sounded vague, unhelpful. Now, it felt loaded. The clerk had never been asked to identify anyone in a lineup because no suspect fit well enough to justify it. Detectives tracked him down again, older, cautious, surprised anyone still cared. His memory was fuzzy, but one thing hadn't changed, the feeling he'd had that night, a sense of tension that lingered after Emily walked out the door. That tension echoed in other forgotten corners of the file. A neighbor had reported hearing tires screech near Galena Boulevard around 9:30 p.m., followed by laughter, then silence. The call had been logged and dismissed as unrelated noise. Another witness had mentioned a man arguing on a payphone near the ATM, his voice sharp, urgent. That lead had gone nowhere, buried under dozens of others that seemed more promising at the time. Now, detectives laid them all out, connecting dots that hadn't been visible before because they'd been scattered across years and shifts and changing priorities. The man who confessed was brought back in for another interview, this time confronted with these details. He listened, nodding slowly, then shook his head. He said he didn't know about the convenience store. He said he didn't remember any screeching tires. He admitted to being near the ATM, but denied being on a phone. His story contracted, shedding specifics instead of gaining them, and that made investigators uneasy. Real memories, especially traumatic ones, tend to sharpen with pressure, not dissolve. Meanwhile, forensic results continued to trickle in, each one complicating the picture. The partial DNA recovered from Emily's jacket matched the confessor, but it was touch DNA, the kind that transfers easily, the kind defense attorneys love to dismantle. Another profile, recovered from the necklace clasp, didn't match him or anyone in state or national databases. It belonged to a male unknown, a ghost encoded in genetic markers. The discovery shifted the tone in the room. This wasn't just about whether the confession was real, it was about whether it was complete. Detectives started to consider scenarios they hadn't wanted to entertain. A chance encounter that escalated. A planned meeting that went wrong. Or something worse, a layered crime, involving more than one person, more than one motive. They revisited Emily's social circle, not just close friends, but acquaintances, coworkers, people who brushed past her life briefly and left impressions that hadn't seemed important. Patterns emerged in hindsight, subtle overlaps between people who didn't appear connected on the surface. One name resurfaced quietly at first, then with growing insistence. Mark Delaney. He'd worked in the same medical complex as Emily, not directly with her, but close enough to cross paths regularly. In 1999, he'd been questioned once and dismissed. He had an alibi, shaky but unchallenged, and no criminal record. He moved out of state a year after Emily disappeared, a detail noted but never pursued. Now, detectives pulled his file again, noticing how often his name appeared in peripheral notes, how frequently he'd been mentioned by others as around a lot. They tracked Delaney down in a neighboring state, living a quiet life, married, 2 kids, a job that required background checks. When contacted, he was cooperative, even helpful, offering to answer questions to clear his name. He remembered Emily vaguely, said she was nice, said they'd talked a few times at work. He denied any involvement, denied seeing her outside the office. But his timeline for the night she vanished had gaps, periods of time he couldn't account for with certainty. Not incriminating, not exculpatory, just empty. As Delaney's name circulated internally, the confessor reacted in ways that were hard to ignore. When asked about him, he stiffened, then laughed it off, saying he barely remembered the guy. Later, he asked detectives why they were dragging other people into it. The defensiveness was subtle but telling. Investigators wondered if they were watching guilt splinter or if they were seeing the frustration of a man whose attempt at absolution was slipping out of his control. Publicly, none of this was known. The city clung to the idea of resolution, even as it grew more fragile. Editorials debated whether cold cases should be reopened at all if the answers they produced were this uncertain. Online forums turned vicious, accusing police of incompetence or, worse, of hiding the truth. Emily's name trended again, stripped of context, reduced to speculation and argument. Behind closed doors, the case grew heavier. Detectives re-examined evidence storage logs, uncovering an error from years ago, a bag mislabeled, its contents misfiled. Inside was a scrap of fabric found near the access road where Emily's belongings had been scattered. It hadn't matched anything at the time and had been forgotten. New testing revealed fibers consistent with upholstery from a specific car model popular in the late 1990s. Not the car the confessor claimed to own. Not a coincidence that could be easily dismissed. They confronted him with this too. His reaction was immediate, visceral. He denied knowledge of the fabric, denied being in such a vehicle, denied everything with an intensity that felt rehearsed. When the interview ended, detectives sat in silence, listening to the hum of the lights, feeling the familiar frustration of a truth that hovered just out of reach. The case, once cold, was now volatile, its temperature rising with every new discovery. Each answer bred more questions. Each step forward threatened to pull the investigation apart. Yet beneath the chaos, a shape was forming, indistinct but undeniable, suggesting that the story everyone thought they knew had never existed at all. And as night fell again over Aurora, as streets emptied and lights flickered off in houses where people whispered about Emily Carter and what really happened to her, the investigation edged closer to a realization no one wanted to voice. The confession that had shocked the city might not have been the end of the mystery. It might have been the beginning of something far more unsettling, a reminder that some cold cases don't just hide answers. They hide entire truths, waiting for the moment when the pressure becomes too great to contain them. Pressure has a way of changing people, and in the weeks that followed, it began to bend everyone connected to the case. Inside interview rooms and offices, voices lowered, tempers shortened, and the air carried that familiar mixture of caffeine, paper, and quiet dread. The investigation had crossed an invisible line. This was no longer about confirming a confession. It was about untangling a web that had been deliberately knotted in the dark. Detectives split their focus, one team pressing the confessor harder, the other reopening the shadow investigation around Mark Delaney. Old employment records were pulled, schedules reconstructed, coworkers tracked down from across the country. In 1999, Delaney had worked irregular hours, often staying late, often volunteering for shifts no one else wanted. On the night Emily disappeared, he'd claimed he was covering for someone, but the paperwork backing that claim was thin, almost suspiciously so. The supervisor who signed off on it had since passed away, taking clarification with him. Cell phone data from that era was crude, limited, but not useless. Delaney's phone records showed a gap that night, a dead zone that could be explained by coverage issues or by choice. Detectives compared it to the confessor's records, noticing overlaps that didn't prove contact but suggested proximity. Two separate lives moving through the same narrow slice of time, close enough to touch, close enough to collide. When Delaney was brought in for a formal interview, he arrived composed, almost eager to cooperate. He spoke carefully, choosing words that sounded reasonable, practiced. He remembered Emily's smile, her professionalism, her kindness. He denied any personal relationship, denied calling her outside of work, denied seeing her that night. But when detectives mentioned the convenience store receipt, his eyes flicked away, just for a second. He said he didn't shop there. Records showed otherwise. He'd been irregular. The questioning stretched on, looping back, circling inconsistencies. Delaney grew tense, then irritated, then defensive. He accused police of chasing ghosts, of ruining lives for the sake of headlines. When asked directly where he was between 9 and 10 p.m. on that July night, he paused, longer than necessary, then said he'd been driving, clearing his head. No destination. No witnesses. Just motion. At the same time, the confessor's story continued to degrade under scrutiny. Each interview shaved off certainty, replacing it with qualifiers and contradictions. He admitted now that he might not have acted alone. He suggested someone else had been present, then retracted it. He spoke about fear, about being manipulated, about making a choice he didn't fully understand at the time. The language shifted from confession to justification, a subtle but critical change. Forensic analysts delivered another blow. The unknown DNA profile from the necklace clasp showed markers common in the region, but rare enough to narrow possibilities. When compared against Delaney's voluntary sample, the match wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to raise eyebrows. Partial overlap. Familial similarity. Enough to suggest a connection without confirming it. The room fell silent when the results were read aloud. This was the kind of evidence that never existed in 1999, the kind that turns suspicion into strategy. Investigators began to entertain a theory that felt dangerous to articulate, a shared crime, born of opportunity and silence. Two men, one impulsive, one calculating. One who spoke now and one who never had. They revisited the scattered belongings, the pattern of their placement, the distances between them. It looked less like panic and more like staging, as if someone wanted the scene to suggest chaos while hiding intent. The access road where the items were found came back into focus. It wasn't random. It was a place locals knew, a shortcut rarely patrolled, close enough to town to reach quickly, far enough to avoid attention. Delaney had driven that route to work for years. The confessor admitted knowing it too. Overlap again. Pattern again. As word leaked that another suspect was being examined, the city's reaction shifted from shock to disbelief. People argued over which version of the story they wanted to believe. Some clung to the confession, desperate for closure. Others sensed the truth was slipping further away, becoming more complicated, more unsettling. Emily Carter's name became shorthand for uncertainty, for the idea that even solved cold cases can fracture under light. The media circled relentlessly. Reporters camped outside homes, dug into social histories, speculated openly. Delaney's family felt the weight of it immediately. His wife defended him publicly, her voice shaking. His children were pulled from school early as rumors spread. The confessor's relatives retreated into silence, already exhausted by a past they'd tried to bury. Inside the department, tension mounted. Prosecutors warned that without a clear narrative, charges could collapse under their own weight. Detectives pushed back, arguing that the narrative was emerging, messy but real. They worked late into the night, fueled by the sense that they were closer than ever to something resembling the truth, even if that truth refused to settle into a clean shape. One night, alone in an interview room, the confessor finally broke in a way he hadn't before. He spoke not of Emily, but of fear. Of being watched. Of promises made and threats implied. He said there were things he couldn't say out loud, not yet. When pressed, he fell silent, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. The case had reached a tipping point. Evidence was converging, but certainty remained elusive. Two lives intersected in 1999, bound by secrets, by silence, by a moment that refused to stay in the past. And as investigators prepared for what they knew would be the most critical phase yet, one reality became impossible to ignore. This cold case wasn't thawing into clarity. It was melting into something darker, revealing not a single truth, but a shared one, fractured and dangerous, waiting for the smallest mistake to bring it all crashing down. By the time the investigation reached its 5th week of renewed life, sleep became optional and silence felt suspicious. Detectives moved through the department like ghosts, eyes red, voices hoarse, driven by the sense that the truth was no longer buried deep but hovering just above the surface, taunting them. Every phone call felt urgent. Every document seemed capable of changing everything. The case had developed its own gravity, pulling people in whether they wanted to be involved or not. They returned again to the night itself, reconstructing it minute by minute, not as a timeline on paper, but as a lived experience. Investigators drove the routes Emily might have taken at the same time of night, under similar weather conditions, windows down, radios off. They listened to the city breathe, to the way sound traveled after dark, to how easy it was to miss something important. The access road felt different in person. Too quiet. Too intentional. You didn't end up there by accident. One detective noticed something that hadn't been emphasized before. The spacing of Emily's belongings wasn't random. The shoe was found first, closer to town. The jacket farther out. The necklace even deeper along the road. It formed a line, a direction, as if someone had been moving steadily, deliberately, discarding pieces along the way. Panic scatters. Control arranges. That realization shifted the mood instantly. When they brought this observation to the confessor, his reaction was telling. He frowned, asked for clarification, then nodded slowly, as if recognizing a pattern he hadn't meant to reveal. He said he'd been driving fast, that things fell out. Detectives pointed out that car doors don't open themselves, that items don't land in orderly progression unless someone places them there. His answer came too quickly. He said he didn't remember. Memory loss again. Convenient. Predictable. Meanwhile, financial records from 1999 were re-examined with modern tools. Emily's bank account showed the ATM withdrawal, $40, never spent. No transactions afterward. But another detail emerged. A deposit made earlier that day, cash, an unusual amount for her. Detectives traced it to a reimbursement from work, signed off by a supervisor who remembered nothing unusual. But coworkers recalled Emily mentioning she was meeting someone about something important later that night. Not social. Not casual. Important. That word echoed through the case. Important enough to leave home twice. Important enough not to mention names. Important enough to carry cash. Investigators wondered if Emily had planned to confront someone or if she'd been summoned under false pretenses. Both possibilities pointed away from randomness and toward design. Mark Delaney was questioned again, this time about money. He denied lending or borrowing cash from Emily. He denied discussing anything important with her. But when detectives presented records showing he'd withdrawn a similar amount earlier that week, his composure cracked. He said it was coincidence. He said lots of people used cash back then. True. And yet the pattern felt too neat. The confessor, pressed separately, admitted that money had been mentioned that night. He said Emily was upset, said she accused someone of lying to her. When asked who, he hesitated, then said he couldn't remember. The room went cold. Forgetting names while recalling details is not how memory works. It's how avoidance does. Forensic analysts delivered another update, quieter but just as significant. The fabric fibers found near the access road matched the upholstery of a late 90s sedan model Delaney had leased at the time. Leasing records confirmed it. The confessor had never owned or driven that model. The evidence didn't scream guilt, but it whispered alignment, enough to make coincidence uncomfortable. Detectives began to suspect the confession had served a purpose beyond guilt. It had redirected attention. It had absorbed pressure. It had created a focal point while something else remained just out of frame. Whether intentional or not, it had worked, at least temporarily. Now, as scrutiny shifted, the structure beneath it started to show cracks. The confessor was offered a deal to tell the full truth. Reduced charges. Protection. A chance to stop carrying the weight alone. He listened, nodded, asked for time. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, slower. He said he hadn't planned to hurt anyone. He said he'd been told things would be taken care of. He said he didn't know how bad it would get. The words hung there, heavy, incomplete, pointing toward someone else without naming them. Investigators pushed. Names matter. He shut down. Asked for a lawyer. The interview ended, the air thick with frustration. Outside, the city buzzed again, rumors spreading faster than facts. People chose sides without realizing it. Some believed the confessor was a liar protecting himself. Others believed Delaney was being railroaded by a system desperate for resolution. Very few believed the full truth had been spoken. Emily's family was briefed privately. They listened, stone-faced, absorbing implications no one should have to consider. They asked one question, quietly, almost pleading. Do you know what really happened to her? The answer was honest and devastating. Not yet. As the days passed, the case reached a strange equilibrium. Evidence pointed in multiple directions. Statements overlapped without aligning. The past refused to simplify itself for the present. Detectives felt the weight of every decision, knowing that a single misstep could collapse everything they'd rebuilt. Late one night, alone with the files, a senior investigator wrote a note on the board that no one else had dared to say out loud. This wasn't one mistake. It was a series of choices. The implication was clear. Whatever happened in 1999 wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a progression involving more than one person, more than one lie, sustained by silence for decades. And as Aurora slept, unaware of how close it was to another rupture, the case pressed forward into dangerous territory. Because once you accept that a crime was shared, the question changes. It's no longer who did it. It becomes who stayed quiet. And in a city where everyone thought they knew each other, That question carried the power to tear everything apart. Silence became the loudest sound in the room. After the lawyer arrived and the confessor stopped talking, the investigation entered its most dangerous phase, the stretch where answers are close enough to feel but still far enough to escape. Detectives knew this moment well. It was where cases either collapsed under their own complexity or broke open in ways no one could control. And this one, they could feel it, was straining at the seams. With the confessor legally sealed off, attention narrowed on Mark Delaney. Not as a suspect on paper, but as a presence threaded through the case in ways that grew harder to dismiss. Investigators reconstructed his movements in 1999 with a precision that bordered on obsession. Credit card statements, toll booth records, maintenance logs from his leased car. A pattern emerged, subtle but persistent. Delaney had been near the access road more often than his job required, both before and after Emily vanished. At the time, no one noticed. Now, it felt deliberate. They re-interviewed former coworkers who had been reluctant before, people who had shrugged off strange behavior as none of their business. Distance and time loosened tongues. One nurse recalled Delaney asking about Emily's schedule more than once, framing it as concern, but lingering on details longer than necessary. Another remembered Emily complaining about someone at work who wouldn't leave her alone, though she'd never said a name. Back then, it sounded like annoyance. Now, it sounded like warning. Investigators tracked down Emily's personal journal, something that had been cataloged but never fully analyzed. Most entries were ordinary, notes about work, friends, small frustrations. But in the weeks before her disappearance, the tone shifted. Shorter sentences, less detail. One line, written 3 days before she vanished, stood out like a bruise. I told him I want this to stop. No name, no context, just the implication of pressure. That line became an anchor. Detectives brought it to Delaney during another interview. He stared at the page longer than expected, then shook his head. He said it meant nothing. He said Emily had stress, like anyone else. When pressed, his voice rose, the calm cracking. He accused police of reading into things that weren't there. But his hands trembled slightly on the table, a physical betrayal of control. Meanwhile, forensic genealogy teams took another look at the unknown DNA profile. Databases had expanded since the initial comparison. A distant familial hit surfaced, not enough for a warrant, but enough to narrow geography and social circles. The surname overlapped with someone Delaney had grown up with, a cousin he rarely mentioned, someone who'd moved frequently and left little digital trace. Investigators noted it carefully, another thread added to the web. The confessor, isolated, requested another meeting, but only under strict conditions. When he spoke this time, his words were careful, hedged, as if each one carried risk. He said he felt used. He said he'd been convinced things would never come back to him. He said fear had kept him quiet longer than guilt. When detectives asked again who had convinced him, he looked at the floor and said nothing. Silence as answer. Silence as confirmation. Pressure leaked beyond the department. Prosecutors demanded a path forward, something solid enough to justify charges or to justify stepping back. Neither option felt acceptable. The media sensed the hesitation and filled the vacuum with speculation, stories built on fragments, on unnamed sources, on the human hunger for villains. Delaney's life began to unravel at the edges. His employer placed him on leave. Friends distanced themselves. The quiet life he'd built started to show fractures he couldn't smooth over. Emily's family watched it all with a numb intensity. They had learned not to trust momentum, not to believe too quickly. In private, they revisited memories, conversations that once seemed trivial now replayed with new meaning. Her mother remembered Emily asking once if it was possible to start over somewhere else, to disappear without hurting anyone. At the time, it sounded like stress. Now, it sounded like escape. Late one evening, detectives received a tip that cut through the noise. A former resident of Aurora, now living states away, claimed he'd seen Delaney and the confessor together the week after Emily disappeared. Not at work, not socially, but late at night, near a storage facility on the edge of town. The witness had dismissed it at the time as coincidence. Decades later, watching the news, the image returned with unsettling clarity. They tracked down records from that facility. Most were gone, purged long ago. But one logbook remained, forgotten in a box, its pages yellowed. It showed 2 access entries within minutes of each other on a night that matched the witness's memory. 2 different names. 2 signatures. One belonged to Delaney. The other was the confessor's. When confronted separately, both men reacted the same way. Denial, immediate and emphatic. They claimed they couldn't remember. They suggested mistakes, errors, misinterpretation. But the ink on the page didn't care about excuses. It sat there, stubborn, physical proof of proximity they'd both insisted never existed. Inside the department, the mood shifted from uncertainty to grim focus. This wasn't coincidence anymore. It was convergence. Detectives began drafting parallel theories, mapping out how 2 lives could intersect, how responsibility could be shared without equal action. 1 planner. 1 follower. 1 voice. 1 silence. Still no body. No definitive cause of death. No single piece of evidence that could stand alone in court. The case was strong in shape, weak in core, a structure without a foundation. Everyone felt it. Everyone feared it. As dawn crept in through the windows, casting long shadows across the evidence board, one detective said what they were all thinking. If they pushed too hard without certainty, the case could implode, taking the truth with it. If they didn't push hard enough, it would slip back into the cold, sealed forever by hesitation. Somewhere between those extremes, the answer waited. And as Aurora stirred awake again, unaware of how close it was to another reckoning, the investigation pressed forward, carrying the weight of a realization that refused to let go. This wasn't just about solving a cold case anymore. It was about deciding how much truth the system could survive when it finally came into the light. Momentum returned in uneven bursts, the kind that make investigators distrust their own optimism. Every advance felt provisional, as if the case itself were testing how badly it was wanted. With the storage facility log now part of the record, the narrative could no longer pretend these 2 men lived in separate worlds. Proximity had been proven. Intent was still hiding. Detectives expanded the scope quietly, away from cameras and comment threads, digging into the years immediately after 1999. Behavior after a crime, they believed, often tells more truth than the moment itself. Delaney's life trajectory was re-examined with new eyes. The move out of state. The sudden career shift. The abrupt severing of local friendships. At the time, it had looked like ambition. Now it resembled retreat. Financial analysts noticed something else. In the year following Emily's disappearance, Delaney had paid off several debts faster than expected. Not with a windfall, not with anything dramatic, but with a steady stream of unexplained cash deposits, small enough to avoid notice, consistent enough to matter. When questioned years later during a routine audit, he'd attributed it to savings and family help. No one challenged him. No one was looking then. The confessor's post, 1999 life, told a different story. He stayed. He struggled. He cycled through jobs, relationships, addictions. He had been arrested for minor offenses, nothing violent, nothing that connected him publicly to Emily Carter. But investigators noticed a pattern of proximity again, moments where he appeared just close enough to Delaney's orbit to matter. Shared addresses years apart. Mutual acquaintances who insisted they didn't know either man well. Silence layered on silence. One of those acquaintances finally spoke. A man who had been young then, reckless, now sober and tired of carrying memories he never asked for. He described a night when the confessor showed up shaken, asking for help, saying he'd done something stupid, and that someone else was handling it. The name he'd mentioned back then meant nothing to the witness at the time. Now, hearing Delaney's name on the news, it clicked. The memory settled into place like a missing piece. Investigators verified the story where they could. Dates lined up. Locations overlapped. Nothing definitive, but enough to strengthen the shape of the truth. They brought the witness informally, recorded his statement, aware that defense attorneys would attack it relentlessly. Time corrodes memory. But sometimes it preserves fear, and fear has a way of telling the truth even when details blur. The confessor was confronted with this account. His shoulders sagged as if something heavy had finally been set down. He didn't confirm it outright. He didn't deny it either. He said only that he'd been scared, that he'd trusted the wrong person, that things had gone too far too fast. The phrasing mattered. Too far. Not by accident. Not I didn't mean to. Too far implies intention that escaped control. Delaney, confronted separately with the same information, reacted with anger. He dismissed the witness as unreliable, a liar chasing relevance. He demanded to know who else police had talked to, what else they thought they knew. The questions came rapid fire, less about clearing his name and more about assessing damage. Investigators noted it carefully. Innocence rarely worries about the breadth of an investigation. As pressure mounted, the city's patience wore thin. Public opinion fractured. Some demanded arrests, any arrests, arguing that justice delayed was justice denied. Others warned against railroading, against mistaking complexity for guilt. Emily Carter's face returned to screens again, younger than everyone watching, frozen in a moment that refused to age. Candlelight vigils flared and faded, ritualized grief struggling against exhaustion. Behind the scenes, prosecutors drafted two versions of the future. One where charges were filed on a shared responsibility theory, risking acquittal but forcing truth into the open. Another where the case paused again, evidence banked, waiting for the one missing piece that could turn suspicion into certainty. Neither option felt like victory. The forensic genealogy team called late one afternoon with an update that shifted the balance. The unknown DNA profile had produced another distant match, this one stronger, closer, pointing again toward Delaney's extended family. Not proof, but convergence. Pattern layered upon pattern until coincidence began to suffocate under the weight of repetition. Detectives gathered in a small room, the kind without windows, where decisions feel heavier because there's nowhere for doubt to escape. They laid out everything they had. The confession that bent under pressure. The journal entry. The money. The fibers. The storage facility log. The witnesses. None of it alone could convict. Together, it told a story that was hard to ignore. One detective said quietly what everyone else was thinking. If they waited for perfection, they'd wait forever. Cold cases don't end cleanly. They end because someone decides the truth is strong enough to stand, even if it trembles. That night, as Aurora settled into uneasy sleep, search warrants were drafted. Old properties. Storage units. Places tied to Delaney's past that had never been searched because no one had dared to ask. The confessor was notified that cooperation now could still matter. He asked for time. Time, the one thing this case had already taken too much of. As dawn approached, the sense of inevitability grew. Something was about to give. Either the truth would finally surface, or the case would fracture beyond repair. In the quiet hours before that decision, the city held its breath again, unaware that the next move would decide whether this cold case would finally burn through its silence, or disappear back into it forever. The searches began without ceremony, no sirens, no flashing lights, just unmarked cars rolling through neighborhoods that had learned how to look ordinary again. Detectives moved carefully, aware that expectation can contaminate evidence as easily as neglect. They weren't looking for a miracle. They were looking for residue, for something the past had failed to erase. Delaney's former storage unit was first. It hadn't been rented in over 15 years, passed from tenant to tenant, emptied, repainted, its history buried under layers of other people's lives. But concrete remembers. Forensic teams worked slowly, scanning floors, scraping seams, testing drains. They found nothing dramatic. No blood, no bones. Just faint traces of soil inconsistent with the surrounding area, grains that matched the access road where Emily's belongings had been found. Transfer, not disposal. Movement, not ending. Another property yielded more questions than answers. A small rental house Delaney had occupied briefly after leaving Illinois, the kind of place people choose when they don't plan to stay. The current owner allowed access, curious, unsettled. In the crawl space beneath the floor, investigators found an old tarp folded tight, brittle with age. Testing revealed degraded biological material, too broken to identify conclusively, but human in origin. The discovery didn't close anything. It opened everything. News of the searches leaked within hours. Headlines grew sharper, speculation louder. Commentators spoke as if the ending were already written. Inside the department, no one shared that confidence. Evidence without context can mislead as easily as it can reveal. They needed narrative, not just fragments. The confessor was brought in again. This time, the tone changed. Less confrontation, more gravity. He was told about the tarp, about the soil, about the family links in the DNA. He listened, eyes closed, breathing shallow. When he spoke, his voice barely carried. He said he hadn't known where things ended up. He said he'd been told not to ask questions. He said he believed, at the time, that silence was survival. Detectives pressed gently, then harder. Who told you? He swallowed. He said names were dangerous. He said time doesn't protect you the way people think. The implications settled over the room like fog. Fear hadn't faded with decades. It had matured. Meanwhile, Delaney's legal team went on the offensive, filing motions, challenging warrants, questioning the integrity of the investigation. They framed the case as a witch hunt fueled by a desperate confession and modern hindsight. Some of their arguments landed. Judges asked hard questions. Timelines were scrutinized. Every mistake from 1999 was dragged into the light and weaponized. Emily's family watched the back and forth with quiet endurance. They had learned that justice isn't loud. It's slow, procedural, often cruel in its pacing. In private, they asked investigators a question that cut deeper than any legal challenge. If this goes to court, will they finally say what happened to her? The answer remained uncertain. A breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A retired officer, clearing out his basement, found a box of personal notes he'd kept from his early years on the force. Inside was a sketch, rough and unofficial, drawn from memory after a late-night conversation with the confessor in 1999, when he'd been interviewed as a witness, not a suspect. The sketch showed a bend in the access road, a marker no one had recorded officially because it hadn't seemed important. That marker, investigators realized, had never been searched. They went back. The area had changed, overgrown, partially developed, but the land still dipped where the sketch indicated. Ground-penetrating radar revealed an anomaly, a disturbance inconsistent with natural erosion. The team worked in silence, shovels biting into soil that hadn't been touched since the summer Emily disappeared. What they found wasn't closure. It was confirmation. Fragments. Personal effects degraded beyond recognition. Enough to say she'd been there. Enough to say the story had an ending after all, even if it wasn't the one anyone wanted. The discovery hit the city like a delayed echo. Grief surged anew, heavier for having waited so long. The case shifted irrevocably. No more speculation about disappearance. No more hope for a miracle return. The truth, partial and brutal, had surfaced. Confronted with the findings, the confessor broke. He spoke in halting sentences, finally naming Delaney, finally admitting his role as the one who helped, who stayed quiet, who followed instructions he should have questioned. He described fear, manipulation, the slow realization that silence had cost more than speaking ever could. Delaney denied everything. Even as evidence tightened around him, he maintained innocence, his story rigid, unchanging. Prosecutors prepared charges anyway, knowing the case would be fought inch by inch. The narrative was no longer clean. It never had been. As night fell, Aurora absorbed the news with a stunned stillness. A cold case once labeled solved now felt more complex than ever, its resolution fractured, contested, incomplete. Emily Carter's name was spoken again, not as a headline, but as a presence, a reminder of what time can hide and what it cannot erase. The investigation moved into its final phase, not toward certainty, but toward reckoning. Because even when answers surface, they rarely arrive whole. They arrive broken, demanding to be assembled, piece by painful piece, by a system and a city forced to confront how easily silence can become accomplice. The ground where they found her did not look like a grave. It looked like neglect, like a place people passed without seeing, which felt cruelly appropriate. As forensic teams worked, cameras were kept back, voices hushed, every movement deliberate. This was no longer about investigation alone. It was about respect, about acknowledging that the city had failed to notice what had been hidden in plain sight for decades. The fragments recovered were handled with a care that bordered on reverence. Each item was logged, photographed, wrapped, cataloged, transformed from anonymous earth into evidence, from evidence into truth. Forensic anthropologists spoke in careful language, explaining what could and could not be known. Time had taken much. Animals, weather, soil chemistry had erased details that once mattered. But enough remained to confirm identity. Enough to anchor the story to a physical reality that no one could deny anymore. When Emily Carter's family was notified, there were no screams, no collapse, no dramatic release. Just silence. The kind that follows when grief has already exhausted every loud expression it had. Her mother asked where Emily had been found. Her father asked how long she'd been there. No one asked why. They'd learned that why was a question that rarely delivered comfort. With confirmation came a shift in the legal landscape. Prosecutors moved decisively, filing charges against both men, different in degree but equal in gravity. Against Delaney, the accusations were direct, severe, rooted in planning and control. Against the confessor, they reflected participation, concealment, a role defined by fear and obedience rather than initiation. The language was careful, strategic, aware that every word would be tested in court. Delaney was arrested at dawn. No spectacle. Just handcuffs, a warrant, a quiet street watching from behind curtains. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He stared ahead as if memorizing the world he was about to lose. Later, his attorney would call the arrest premature, reckless, built on circumstantial evidence and a compromised witness. The argument would resonate with some. It would infuriate others. The confessor entered a plea agreement that afternoon. His cooperation, once fragmented and self-serving, became detailed, painful, relentless. He described meetings, conversations, instructions delivered without explicit threats, but heavy with implication. He described being told where to drive, what to carry, what not to ask. He described the night not as chaos, but as inevitability, a series of steps he felt powerless to stop even as he took them. Investigators corroborated what they could. Some details aligned perfectly with physical evidence. Others hovered in the gray space courts know well, plausible but unprovable. The case grew stronger and weaker at the same time, fortified by volume, vulnerable in precision. Public reaction hardened into camps. Some believed justice was finally unfolding, imperfect but real. Others saw a system desperate to pin blame after years of failure, leaning too heavily on a man seeking redemption. The phrase reasonable doubt became a weapon wielded in comment sections and editorials alike. Everyone had an opinion. Few had patience. Emily's story was retold endlessly, reshaped with each telling. She became symbol, cautionary tale, headline. Her family watched it happen with a mixture of gratitude and resentment. Awareness mattered. Accuracy mattered more. They corrected what they could. They let the rest go. The truth, they knew now, would never belong to them alone again. As pretrial hearings began, the evidence was dissected publicly for the first time. Defense attorneys attacked timelines, challenged forensic methods, questioned motives. They painted the confessor as unreliable, manipulated by investigators eager to close a case. They framed Delaney as a convenient villain, ensnared by coincidence and modern bias. Some arguments landed. Others collapsed under cross-examination. The courtroom became a theater of memory and doubt. One moment stood out. The journal entry was read aloud. "I told him I want this to stop." The room went still. No names. No dates. Just a sentence that now carried unbearable weight. The defense argued ambiguity. The prosecution argued context. The jury listened, faces unreadable, tasked with extracting certainty from pain. Outside the courthouse, the city pulsed with tension. People lined up to watch, to feel close to an ending that still refused to settle. News vans idled. Protesters argued quietly. Strangers shared theories like confessions. Aurora had become a witness to its own past, forced to watch it replay under unforgiving lights. At night, detectives reviewed testimony, preparing for what came next, knowing that trials do not deliver truth so much as they negotiate it. They wondered what had been missed, what might still surface, what secrets had died with time. Cold cases rarely resolve cleanly. They resolve because something finally outweighs doubt. As the proceedings moved forward, one thing became clear. Even with charges filed, even with remains recovered, even with confessions spoken, the case resisted closure. Too many years had passed. Too many silences had calcified. The truth, when it arrived, did so fractured, incomplete, demanding belief rather than offering certainty. And as the city waited for a verdict that might finally label the past, the shadow of the question that had haunted Aurora since 1999 lingered, unshaken. Not just who was responsible, but how many moments it took, how many choices were made, how many people looked away, for a young woman to disappear into the spaces between what was known and what was said. The trial stretched time in unnatural ways. Days felt endless, weeks collapsed into moments, and every hour inside the courtroom seemed to echo with the weight of 26 years. Jurors sat still, absorbing fragments of a life and a death they had never known, asked to assemble truth from pieces worn thin by age and repetition. Outside, the city waited, restless, aware that whatever happened here would not feel like victory. The prosecution built its case carefully, not around spectacle, but accumulation. They presented the timeline again, now sharpened by forensic confirmation, walking the jury through that humid July night step by step. The ATM footage played once more, Emily's face enlarged on a screen, her hesitation frozen into something the room could feel. The $40. The unanswered phone. The access road. The scattered belongings. Each fact alone was survivable. Together, they formed pressure. The confessor took the stand early, a strategic choice that drew murmurs from the gallery. He looked smaller than he had in interviews, diminished by the formality of the room and the permanence of sworn testimony. He spoke slowly, voice uneven, describing fear without dramatizing it, obedience without excusing it. He admitted his role plainly. He admitted staying quiet. He admitted knowing that silence had been wrong even then. When asked why he came forward after all these years, he paused long enough for discomfort to settle, then said he couldn't live with the ending anymore. Defense attorneys moved in hard. They questioned his memory, his motives, his deal. They replayed inconsistencies from earlier interviews, highlighting shifts in language, gaps in recall. They suggested coaching. They suggested desperation. The confessor did not argue. He absorbed the blows, answering when he could, falling silent when he couldn't. To some jurors, it looked like honesty. To others, weakness. Delaney's defense followed a different strategy. They never let the jury forget how much time had passed, how many mistakes had been made in 1999, how many assumptions were being layered onto coincidence. They attacked the forensic genealogy evidence as probabilistic, not definitive. They framed the fibers, the soil, the money as circumstantial, pieces that could point anywhere if pushed hard enough. They reminded the jury that no eyewitness had placed Delaney with Emily that night. No recording captured his voice. No document proved intent. When Delaney took the stand, the contrast was stark. He was controlled, articulate, unwavering. He denied everything with consistency that bordered on rigidity. He acknowledged knowing Emily, acknowledged crossing paths with her, but rejected any suggestion of obsession or conflict. He explained his moves, his money, his silence as ordinary life choices misinterpreted through the lens of tragedy. Under cross-examination, he rarely faltered. When he did, it was subtle, a pause here, a tightened jaw there, moments defense argued were meaningless, moments prosecutors let linger. The journal entry returned like a wound reopened. Prosecutors framed it as a quiet plea, evidence of pressure building behind closed doors. Defense framed it as vague, untethered, the projection of investigators searching for narrative. The jury was left to decide whether meaning lived in the words themselves or in everything surrounding them. Experts testified next, careful, precise, aware of their influence. Forensic anthropologists explained what time destroys and what it preserves. DNA analysts spoke of probability and limitation. Genealogists described family trees built from fragments, from distant cousins and shared markers, stressing what could be inferred and what could not. Each expert added clarity and uncertainty in equal measure. As closing arguments approached, tension thickened. The prosecution did not promise certainty. They promised coherence. They argued that while no single piece of evidence told the whole story, together they revealed a pattern too consistent to ignore. They spoke of shared responsibility, of how crimes can be committed through action and silence alike. They reminded jurors that the absence of perfection does not equal the absence of truth. The defense warned against conviction built on narrative rather than proof. They spoke of the danger of hindsight, of letting tragedy fill gaps evidence could not. They reminded jurors of the burden of proof, of how reasonable doubt is not an insult to victims, but a safeguard against irreversible error. Their words landed heavily, especially on jurors who understood the weight of deciding someone's future. When the jury retired, the city exhaled and immediately held its breath again. Days passed with no word. Speculation ran wild. Every movement near the courthouse sparked rumors. Emily's family waited together, not speaking much, united by exhaustion more than hope. They had learned that verdicts do not rewrite the past. They only label it. Inside the jury room, discussions were intense, fractured, human. Some jurors saw the pattern clearly, a story that made sense once all the pieces were laid out. Others saw holes large enough to swallow certainty whole. Votes shifted, then stalled. The law demanded unanimity. The truth resisted it. Late on the fourth day, the jury sent a note to the judge. They were deadlocked on one charge. Agreement on another. The message rippled through the courtroom like electricity. Prosecutors and defense attorneys recalculated. Families braced. The judge instructed them to continue deliberations, to listen again, to weigh again. That night, Aurora slept uneasily. Streetlights cast long shadows that felt heavier than usual. People wondered what justice looked like after so long, whether it arrived as a verdict or as the simple acknowledgement that something terrible had happened and could not be undone. By morning, the jury returned. Faces pale. Movements slow. The courtroom filled, standing room only, everyone aware that whatever came next would be imperfect, incomplete, and permanent. As the foreperson stood, the air seemed to tighten, as if the city itself leaned forward, waiting to hear whether decades of silence would finally be given a name, or whether the cold case, even now, would refuse to settle into certainty. The verdict did not arrive like thunder. It came quietly, almost carefully, as if the room itself were afraid of what it might unleash. The foreperson's voice was steady, practiced, the sound of someone reading words that would follow them for the rest of their life. Guilty on one count. Not guilty on another. A hung decision where certainty refused to form. The words landed unevenly, striking different people in different ways, leaving no one untouched and no one fully satisfied. Delaney did not react at first. His face remained fixed, eyes forward, absorbing the reality that part of the story now belonged to the record whether he accepted it or not. The confessor lowered his head, relief and shame colliding in a posture that looked almost like prayer. Emily's family closed their eyes, not in triumph, not in defeat, but in something quieter, a momentary release from the tension of waiting, even as the weight of loss pressed back in. The judge spoke next, measured, deliberate, acknowledging the complexity of the case, the years it had taken to reach this room, the limits of what a court could offer. Sentencing would come later. Appeals were inevitable. The law moved forward because it had to, not because it could ever keep up with what had been lost. Outside, microphones waited, cameras blinked, questions flew. Was this justice? Was it enough? Had the truth really been told? There were no clean answers. Prosecutors called it accountability. Defense attorneys called it compromise. Commentators called it historic. None of those words reached Emily Carter. In the days that followed, Aurora tried to return to itself. Streets reopened. News vans left. Conversations shifted to other tragedies, other scandals. But the case lingered, embedded in the city's memory like a scar you only notice when the weather changes. People still drove past the access road and slowed without knowing why. Still glanced at the convenience store windows. Still remembered where they had been in 1999 and how little they'd known. Emily's remains were laid to rest in a private ceremony, no cameras, no speeches for the public. Just family, just names spoken softly, just a promise that she would no longer be a question mark. Her parents stood together, older now, carrying a grief that had matured into something permanent. They did not speak of closure. They spoke of endurance. The confessor began serving his sentence, his cooperation etched into the record, but unable to erase what he'd done or what he hadn't stopped. In interviews given later, he refused to say more than he already had. Some believed he still held pieces back. Others believed there was nothing left to give. The truth, once fractured, rarely reassembles perfectly. Delaney filed his appeal within weeks. His supporters argued the verdict proved doubt. His critics argued it proved guilt had finally caught up. The process dragged on, as processes do, a reminder that the justice system measures time differently than grief does. For Emily's family, the appeals were echoes, distant and exhausting, incapable of changing what mattered most. Years from now, the case would be taught in classes, discussed in podcasts, summarized in articles with headlines that promised resolution. Cold case solved. Shocking confession. Justice after decades. Each phrase would be true and false at the same time. Because solving a case does not resurrect the dead. It does not rewind choices. It only draws lines around what can be proven and leaves the rest to memory. In Aurora, some people believed they finally knew what happened that night. Others believed they never would. Both lived side by side, sharing streets, sharing silence. The city learned, slowly, that certainty is not the same as peace, and that answers, when they come too late, arrive carrying their own kind of pain. The cold case file was eventually closed, stamped, archived, reduced to a number on a spine in a room full of other unresolved stories. But the story itself did not end. It lived on in habits, in caution, in the way people watched each other just a little more closely, aware now of how easily ordinary nights can fracture into history. And somewhere between what was said under oath and what was never spoken aloud, between guilt proven and guilt suspected, the truth settled into its final shape. Incomplete. Heavy. Uncomfortable. A reminder that some mysteries don't end with answers, but with acknowledgement. Because long after the headlines faded, long after the courtroom emptied, long after the city stopped holding its breath, one fact remained, unmovable and unarguable. Emily Carter left her home on a warm night in 1999, believing she would come back. And nothing, not time, not confessions, not verdicts, could ever give her that back. Time did what the verdict could not. It settled, slowly, into the cracks left behind. Months passed. Then years. Headlines stopped mentioning Emily Carter's name, but the case never fully released its grip. It lingered in footnotes, in late-night conversations, in the quiet moments when people realized that knowing something had happened was not the same as understanding why. The courthouse returned to routine. New cases replaced old ones. Different faces sat where Delaney once had, hands folded, futures trembling. The access road was repaved, its rough edges smoothed by fresh asphalt, but drivers still slowed there, instinctively, as if the ground remembered what it had witnessed. No sign marked the spot. No memorial stood. Only space, heavy with absence. Emily's family learned how to live with a truth that came in fragments. They kept photographs where they had always been, on shelves, on walls, frozen smiles from a time before everything split in two. They spoke of her in the present tense sometimes, catching themselves, then deciding not to correct it. Grief, after all, does not obey grammar. The cold case unit moved on, their work done on paper if not in spirit. Files were boxed, labeled, archived. Another mystery waited on another shelf. Yet some investigators still revisited this one in their minds, replaying choices, wondering which detail might have changed everything if seen sooner, if believed earlier. In law enforcement, resolution is often procedural. Closure is personal. Rarely do the two align. Delaney's appeals wound their way through the system, quieter now, stripped of spectacle. Legal arguments replaced emotional ones. Language hardened into precedent and statute. To the courts, he became a case number. To the city, he remained a symbol of guilt, of doubt, of the uncomfortable space between the two. The confessor faded from public view. His name appeared only occasionally, buried in reports few people read. Some believed his testimony had unlocked the truth. Others believed it had merely reshaped it. In the end, belief mattered less than consequence. Silence had shaped the past. Speech had reshaped the present. Neither could change what was done. And Emily remained at the center of it all, paradoxically distant and impossibly close. Not a headline anymore. Not a case file. A young woman who had plans, routines, habits so ordinary they had once felt invisible. The tragedy was not just that she died, but that the world kept going without her, adapting, adjusting, forgetting details she would have remembered. Cold cases promise answers. They suggest that time, persistence, and technology can pull truth from the dark. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they only illuminate how much is lost when justice arrives late, damaged by delay. This case did both. It spoke. And it left things unsaid. In Aurora, life continued, cautious but familiar. Children grew up hearing fragments of the story, warnings disguised as anecdotes. Parents locked doors a little earlier. Strangers were watched a little longer. The lesson was never written down, but it was learned all the same. Mystery does not need to be complete to be powerful. Because even now, even with verdicts and confessions and years of analysis, one question still moves quietly through the city, unchallenged and unanswered. What truly happened in the moments no one saw? In the silence between choices? In the dark space where truth fractured? That is where the cold case still lives. Not in files or courts or headlines, but in the enduring knowledge that some stories end not with